Ramsar site. According to the USAID Global Ecosystem Typology, plantation are very important in the northeast. It is an area with important rivers that flow into the wetland. Some pastures and fields are very important in the south. It is an area used for livestock farming. Mangroves and shrubland are very important in national parks. It is in the north at center of the Great Lagoon. In this slide, we can see the first table for accounting for the extent of the ecosystem in the Ciénaga Grande, with opening stock, closing stock, and net change in extension for the accounting period 2012 to 2018. There are considerable losses in strategic ecosystems such as mangroves, inland wetland, coastal wetland, and inland water. By contrast, there are gains in permanent crops. In this slide, we have the ecosystem type chain matrix in the Ciénaga Grande Ramsar site in the 2012 to 2018 accounting period. I like to highlight three results. First, the mangrove ecosystem were mainly transformed into open space with little or no vegetation. The inland wetland ecosystem were mainly transformed into heterogeneous agricultural areas. The transition map showed the geographical position on the transition between natural to transformed ecosystem and transformed to natural. It is important to resume the chain. For example, there are laws from natural to transformed areas close to national park, plantation, and Magdalena River. The red is the loss. No? It's the loss, yes. In this economic accounting table, we can see the condition variables of mangroves and coastal lagoon present in the Great Lagoon for the accounting period 2017 and 2019, with the opening condition in 2017, addition, reduction, and closing condition in 2019. The condition accounts were developed according to the ecosystem condition typology suggested by the SEEA EA. The combined condition account shows the mangroves condition improved, the coastal lagoon condition deteriorated. The ecosystem services were developed according to the system of classification of ecosystem service suggested by the SEEA EA. The account of provision used the information system CPI. It has data about catch in biophysical and price. Then we can have evaluation of wild fish and other natural aquatic biomass provision. Although there is a positive change in catch, the monetary value might decrease. It is important because the population of the territory depends on the fishing resource of the Great Lagoon. The decrease in monetary real value can have an effect on their living condition. The account of regulation shows the carbon storage in tons. We have set the carbon tax in Colombia as carbon price. There is a decrease since 2015, but since 2018, there is recovery progress associated with the application of recovery strategies. The monetary ecosystem assets account resumed the results. The ecosystem assets have an important loss. The more considerable loss was in mangroves. The mangroves are an important ecosystem for other ecosystems and very important for ecosystem service. These results show the critical condition of the Ciénaga Grande resource ecosystem of which families with high poverty levels depend. In this slide, we show the data gaps and challenges for accounting in marine and coastal ecosystem. First, applying the natural capital approach for the coastal marine environment poses a series of particular challenges that often require modifying methods and strategies because we have less information. The delimitation of marine and coastal ecosystem is more difficult. Second, by developing accounting tables, information that were identified as data were not collected as the expected spatial or temporal disaggregation level. For this reason, the ecosystem condition accounts were limited to mangroves and coastal lagoons because of the data availability. Four, regarding the ecosystem service flow accounts, difficulties were identified with regard to the limiting to a specific contribution of each ecosystem to synergical generate matter and energy flow. 10, we need to reset ecosystem service boundaries. Fifth, another important relationship in the wide society receive ecosystem service, the biophysical increase in fish catch is not always directly related to the received monetary resource. Also, we have identified the necessity of improving the capacity of researchers in statistical analysis, geographic information system, and data science. We need to keep updating the accounts, explore the possibility of other thematic accounts, such as nature tourism and circular economy. Finally, in Colombia, environmental and economic accounts are part of the derived statistic. The country has a developed account of the central framework of the SEEA. From the ecosystem account, there is an agenda to develop in the coming years. The Ciénaga Grande Santa Marta Marine and Coastal Ecosystem account serves as an input and case of study for the ecosystem account at the national level. Thank you very much. It is all.
Thank you very much, Janwar. This was a very interesting and excellent presentation. It shows that indeed following the logic of the SEEA EA, that to implement and develop the different accounts, you can provide an overview of, well, how the ecosystems are doing and indeed what is the interaction with society and economy. So thank you very much for this excellent presentation. It was, I think, a very good start of this session. Are there any questions with regard to these presentations? Put on my glasses so I can see.
I can tell you.
Yes, there at the back.
Me? I think Marta from the European Space Agency. Actually, I have three questions, but they can be short in the answers. One is that I was wondering if the author could say something about the methods and the data source they've been using for the different accounts on extant conditions and services. But very briefly, or at least where to find information. The second point, it was not discussed at all, the issues of uncertainties in the data and the methods that, of course, has an impact on the accounts, and how does he deal with uncertainties. And the third question is, this is a very local wetland, so Ramsar site, so how difficult it is to upscale the methods they've been using at a national scale.
Janwar, can you respond to these questions?
Yes. The more important, the difficult is in the differentiation between terrestrial and wetland, because the system of environmental and economic account is about the terrestrial ecosystem, and we have not, it's not easy delimit the marine ecosystem. For example, we have the ecosystem mob in the marine environmental. Yes, excuse me, I don't. Hello?
Okay. Thanks. Are there any more questions for this presentation? I see no other. Also in the chat, there's nothing. No. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Janwar. Thank you again for this very nice presentation. Then I think we'll move on to the next presentation, which is by Simon Felgendreher. Simon is an environmental economist by training and holds a PhD from Gothenburg University in economics. In 2018, he joined the Federal Statistical Office of Germany and started working in the area of sustainability reporting and water statistics. And since 2020, he coordinates the activities of the Statistical Office to set up ecosystem accounts for Germany. In addition, he's responsible for the calculation and reporting of potential environmentally damaging subsidies within the SEEA framework. Okay, Simon, the floor is yours.
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
Oh, 1 second.
Yeah, I can test the microphone. And okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Session Chair, and especially also to the OECD and the UNECE for giving me the opportunity to present today on the ecosystem accounting in Germany. And I will especially talk on the current state and challenges we encountered when building up our accounts. So next slide, please. I have to count it. Okay. So yeah, this slide might be familiar to some of you. So it's the overview of the accounts following the SEEA EA. And in my talk now, I'll focus especially on the extent and condition account, because that's where we have done most of the work until now. And I'll delve directly into the extent account. So yeah, so yeah, what is the aim, or what do we aim for with our extent account for Germany? So we try to cover the entire territory of Germany and also the marine areas, including the environmental, the economic exclusive zone, which you see here in dark blue. And the aim is to provide data that is on spatially high resolution. So here you see a map of 100 times 100 meter raster with the main ecosystem, and we also have published data on on the municipal level and the shares of each ecosystem. And the extent account will serve as a base for condition and services accounts. And yeah, how did we proceed, or what did we do? So we started by coming up with a new ecosystem classification. So when you look here in the middle to the dark blue bar, this is basically the heart of the classification. So the most disaggregated form, where we have come up with 74 ecosystem classes, which then can be aggregated to 21 ecosystem groups on the left. And these can be aggregated again to 6 ecosystem divisions, which are similar to the main CLC ecosystem groups, categories like settlement areas or forests, etc. So if you now could click on the ECT on the right button, hope this works. On the right button, there's like a link. Yeah. Thank you. So this is an overview of the classification. And since it's too detailed, I'll zoom into one to give you more of an idea of what we did. So here you see the division for the ecosystem division for forest and woodland. And this can be broken down to 4 ecosystem groups, like broadleaf forests,
coniferous forest, mixed forest, and transitional wood and shrubland. In each of these groups, again, can be broken down to 3 ecosystem classes each, so which gives us in total 12 ecosystem classes for forest and woodland. So back once. Thank you. So yeah, and this is how the classification looks like. And what we thought about from the beginning is how this classification can be mapped into international classifications. So here you see on the right hand the major classification systems like CLC, UNIS, MACE, and IUCN. And yeah, we thought from the beginning how this can be mapped so that we don't have work later on in making a mapping in these classes. And of course, we also considered the new classification by Eurostat and tested it already, and this works pretty well as well. So we are prepared for also any reporting requirements we will encounter in the future. So yeah, so what did we do then? Well, we had the classification, and of course in this step as well, we already checked if there's data to actually report on these ecosystems. But then we had a bunch of data sources, and the base of the extent account is land cover and land use model that is produced every 3 years for Germany for the entire territory. And we enriched this model basically with a bunch of data sets, which gives us more detailed information on specific ecosystem, like on lakes or on different data sets, but also data from various sources. And then we reproduced a classification algorithm where basically the data is overlaid and we get our products, which are accounting tables, which just shows the change or the state in each year, 2015 and 2018. We started with these 2 years and the change between the years. And also an online atlas, which we will relaunch now in May and will be hopefully more user-friendly and where data can be also then be downloaded directly. And we also wrote an extensive methodological report, which gives you detailed insights, because our aim was also to be as transparent as possible with our calculation methods and how we proceeded so that everybody can follow it. This methodological report also includes ecosystem profiles. If you could click there. Sorry for, So here you see just an example. So we produced these profiles for each of the 74 ecosystem classes with a short description and author photo, and then how we classified it. So from the base, what is the baseline source of data, and then how it maps into international classifications. So we could go back. And this report, unfortunately, until now, most of the products are only available in German. We have some rough data or some rough tables on our webpage. And consecutively, we aim to produce all the results also in English. And the good news is that the methodological report is already available. Unfortunately, not on our webpage because we have some issues getting it there, like some internal queries. But on request, we are happy to share it with you for internal use. So just write us an email and we'll send it to you. This is basically what I already said for the extent account. And now let me come to the condition account. And here, let me also thank Eurostat for supporting us with a grant where part of the work on the condition account, or much of the work, is funded. So the aim of the condition account is to identify characteristic properties of the ecosystem and monitor the stability and integrity of ecosystems. And of course, it will then serve as a base for the services account. And here you just see a map, an illustration of the particulate matter concentration for Germany. So similar to what the ecosystem classification was for the extent account, you see here the ecosystem condition typology as a starting point for us, also following the SEEA EA logic, where it is distinguished between abiotic, biotic, and landscape characteristics. And it's an example on the division for forest and woodland. And on the right-hand side, you basically see the variables and indicators that we identified on the national level that can serve that are the base for our condition account, and which we identified that they are strong to monitor the condition of this specific ecosystem. And we have different types of variables. So on the, I don't have the time to go into detail of each of them, but just give you an overview. So basically the physical and chemical variables, they rely on model data, where we are happy or grateful that we can rely on data from other agencies that have produced this data already. So they, in each of this variable already contains a lot of data and different data inputs. For example, like the pH value in soil. And then we have like data characteristic bird species, which relies on in situ monitoring, and data like the tree cover density and the NDVI, which relies on remote sensing data. And then also some more variables. So these are like the baseline. And as you already might see, is that we have a challenge here to find adequate data on biota and species basically. And this is of course linked to the fact that there you need monitoring data in situ, people going out there counting animals. And they're not, at least nationwide, we don't have much data sources here, unfortunately. So we'll hope that this will be improved in the future. So let me now show you a very first draft that we present the first time of our condition accounting table. So how actually the accounts will look like. We hope we can publish it in May. And on the left-hand side, basically, you see, well, in the first rows, you see the values for the entire country, and below from the federal states. So here you just see a couple of them, and in the columns, you see some of the variables. It's not all of them, since then it wouldn't fit on the slide. And basically what we do is we report, similar to the extent account, values for the starting year and the final year, which are 2015 and 18, and then the change of the variables. And how much this can be broken down depends much on the variables. If we can provide them with a high resolution, or if they are just on a very aggregated level available. For instance, this bird species, which I mentioned earlier, is just available for the entire country and cannot be disaggregated. So there basically we just get one value for each year for Germany, and then the rest of the table would be blank. But then we also have variables like the model data, which often is available like on a raster grid on a high resolution, and that can be broken down to a municipal level or on a raster grid. And since we also have the detailed level on the extent account, we can produce it on a rather small level, depending on the variables. And yeah, unfortunately, we only can do 2018 now, since we are still waiting for the base data for 2021 for the extent account, and then we will also publish the conditional results. So yeah, the challenge here is a bit to get all the data into a simple format, in the same format, since of course we could produce basically a table with 10,000 rows for each municipality, but then would nobody read. So our aim is to provide some overview tables down to the federal state level, where we have 16, and the rest we'll just provide as like machine readable data, and also in the form of some maps, which will integrate into our new online atlas. So yeah, just to summarize what we did is basically we started to identify the variables and indicators that are available on the national level, and broke this down on our polygons on our extent account area, and then from the base aggregated it up to the level possible. And what we will produce and publish are like accounting tables and machine readable data on a more detailed level, then selected maps in the online atlas, and again, a methodological report where we are careful in describing what we did. So this already brings me to to my conclusion. So the accounts rely on a wide range of data sets from different sources. data on biota and biodiversity is unfortunately quite scarce. We are a bit hopeful that this will improve, especially in the agricultural area. We have some promising monitoring networks that are built up at the moment, so we hope that the data situation will get better. And when it comes to remote sensing data, yeah, the situation is already quite good. We are happy that we could integrate some data sets in both accounts. But what is important for us is the continuous and reliable data provision. For example, in the case of the extent account, we are relying on one data product on riparian zones, which is discontinued from the Copernicus program, I think. And there, yeah, now we have to see if we can produce it on our own, again, to get the next years as well. So yeah, this is something. And I don't have, I think, time to go on now for 10 minutes more about water ecosystems, so I'll break it down to a few sentences. Here we rely at the moment on established monitoring systems where there are already obligations in the EU. But here the problem is that the reporting times are different. They normally have 6 years reporting duties, but they in themselves rely on a broad set of detailed data. So in the midterm, our aim would be to get access to this detailed data and then integrate it more adapted to our reporting standards. Yeah, so this is the short overview. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. This was an excellent presentation on extent and condition accounting, and you really showed how you could implement these accounts, in this case for Germany, and also highlighting the challenges. In fact, it's quite similar to the challenges that we also face in the Netherlands for ecosystem accounting. The only difference, of course, Germany is much bigger than the Netherlands. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Simon? Oh yes, that's at the back.
The One Goal initiative, this is not specifically about your presentation, but I was wondering if there was a way, there could be a way to extend the ecosystem accounting model by including the risk created by the flows, the flow accounts, like when a physical or monetary service is rendered, which risks are created. Is there a way to include this in the model?
I don't know which risks. I just have a rough idea what you mean by risks. Perhaps you could specify a bit.
In the process of the exploitation, there might be risks created on a systemic, from a systemic point of view. There might be risks created from a social point of view in various locations. There might be recursions of risks in that a risk that would impact initially on a certain part of the system could cross boundaries of the different I guess regions in from a functional systemic point of view, and impact on other functions, and that way, you know, traveling around the system and then going back. So these are some of the risks. These are basically systemic, cross-cutting, social, other environmental, etc.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, I think I think we are not there yet. So since we haven't even started our work on the services account, and I think this is definitely possible, but I don't think we will be the ones doing it. So our aim is to provide also, as I said, like disaggregated data on like geodata, on different data on other data products, which then allows other applied scientists and researchers to do such analysis. But it's probably beyond the scope of what we will do.
France?
For the presentation. Do you hear me? Thank you very much for the presentation. I have two questions, which are kind of tricky one, but do you have some kind of aggregate indicators being able to answer the simple question, is the global biological results in Germany increasing or decreasing? And the second question is even more difficult. Do you have some works on values of all that, to put monetary values, and maybe say how much would it cost to keep the biological resources in Germany in the same condition as previous year? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so on the aggregated indicators, we discussed it, if we want to include it or not, and then decided, at least at this stage, against it, since our aim is to provide very transparent data, and once you go into this aggregation, you by definition have normative decisions, how you weigh different factors one against the other. Even if you say, well, we weigh them all the same, you have 10 variables you aggregate, then this is already a decision you make, because yeah, this is already something you decide on. So at this stage we decided against it, though we see, of course, the point that if you go to policymakers, they like it that you show them one map for forests and then show them, well, the value is 0.58 and it has gone down from 0.9, so it has decreased. So yeah, we see this. There's a demand definitely for it, but at this stage, at the beginning, we didn't do so. On the second question, the simple answer is no. As I understand, it would be something related to damage costs or something, where you say, like, what would it be to bring them back to? I think that is left for the services account and the monetary valuation there. Of course, you could also do it directly in the condition account, but we haven't done it. I think our aim is to go through the SEEA, like our Bible, step by step, kind of, like do account by account, and then I think further analysis, either we do it in thematic accounts or it's also left for then. I mean, we're happy if then other applied researchers go out and do more depth analysis or do stuff with it, what they think is suitable.
One more question, Paulo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Simon, congratulations for the work presented and for all the efforts in bringing in such a systematic way all the data into a single spreadsheet, even if we saw just the tip of the iceberg. So congratulations to you and to your team. My question is, I feel like a rapper here in this group and also in similar groups. I'd like to ask you, what do you think? Because you have a level of spatial disaggregation, if I understood, at municipality level, like you have Berlin, Hamburg, and other, Bremen, I remember as well. So quite a, I don't know if it's NUTS 2 or NUTS 3 level, so it's quite specific. So my question to you is a reflection. Are you and your team talking with the folks that run those shops, the municipality? Because the data is for a purpose, and most probably you can go so many different ways in searching for data, and you don't have the resources to do so. And eventually, if your data is fitting or fits well in developing a tax scheme or a not in tax scheme, a subsidy scheme for promoting ecosystem service, and you talk with the folks on those municipalities, will be of added value to your work, in my view. So my suggestion would be to have as soon as possible. I know the SEEA Bible for all of you is important, and I am not discussing that. But in that biblical process, please do stock sooner than later with potential end users or final users of your data when they do it for their administration, for management of those posts. And I thank you, and again, congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Paulo, for the question. You're completely right. I think it's super important for us. One of the challenges that we haven't published the data yet. So as soon as we'll do so, hopefully in May, we can go down, especially to the federal states, and also more level. And also with we have much hopes in this new online atlas that we produce where you can download the data, the disaggregated data directly. And then we have a product where we can go and say, look, here's something that might be useful for you. And also the methodological report, which sounds boring, but I think it's an important step that people can just look and see, okay, this data set is important from you. What is the source? What did you do? And then also start their own analysis. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One more final question, Mark.
No, I have a question on the typology, because I've seen that you started from the CLSC, the UNIS classifications up to level 2, not 3, as I understand, the mass, of course, and you also make reference to the global ecosystem typology from IUCN. Sorry? Yeah, to the global typology of IUCN, and of course to the new regulations which Eurostat will come with its own typology. At the end of the day, you have these 74 classes. The I see is that every country will come with their own typologies, which means that there might be some difficulties to aggregate these typologies when we'll do it at European level. I'm thinking at Eurostat, of course, but also at global levels. And we do know that crosswalks are not easy. It's not that you can easily aggregate or disaggregate. So did you already think about this and how you can, let's say, use your typology in the different contexts, starting, of course, with the Eurostat one?
Well, yeah, we thought about it in the terms that is, let me start with Eurostat, that there was a testing round of the new classification, or that is the reporting requirements for the extent account that will come, and we worked on that actively and tested it, and then gave off the feedback if it suits to our classification. And I think the overall feedback was that it fits already pretty well. And that's what I said. Once we came up with these classes, we already thought, do these classes also make sense? Can they be mapped internationally? And yeah, but of course you have this tension that you cannot only go for the mapping and the crosswalking from the beginning, because, for example, we have orchid meadows, or hedgerows, which are super important in Germany, and which are perhaps not as clearly depicted in the IUCN, since it's a global one and it has different uses. But the only thing you can do is from the beginning think about how it can be mapped, and that once you have reporting standards that you can already know where it goes into, and that we did from the beginning.
Okay, thanks, Simon, for this presentation. We'll have to move on to the next presentation, which is an online presentation on SEEA EA implementation in Spain by Fernando Santos Martin. Hopefully you're online. Fernando is an associate professor at the Rey Juan Carlos University of Madrid, Spain. By training, he is a forest engineering with a PhD on forest restoration in tropical areas. Since 2010, he has been working as a leading international scientist on ecosystem assessment and accounting. And since 2021, he is co-chairing the working group on implementation of the SEEA EA for forest ecosystems. Fernando, is the presentation online? Yes, it is. So Fernando, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks everyone for inviting me to present our work in Spain. So, as Sjoerd was saying, my name is Fernando Santos, and I'm presenting the work that we did in the context of this EU project called MAIA. MAIA stands for the Mapping and Assessment for Integrated Ecosystem Accounting. This was an EU project funded between 2018 until 2021. It was actually coordinated by Wageningen University in Lars Haynes. And I'm going to present the work that we did in the context of this project for Spain at national level, and I'm representing the full team from the Rey Juan Carlos University, but especially I would like to acknowledge the work done by my colleague Adrián García Bruzón as well. First, a bit of the context. In Spain, we have been working on mapping and assessment of ecosystem and their services at national scale since 2010, when we started our national ecosystem assessment, where we identified all these ecosystem types and then start working on more on the ecosystem services side and modeling some ecosystem services. And we even went to some monetary evaluations as well. Since 2016, we have started to think and to develop some ecosystem accounts for Spain based on the previous work. And for this, we have been collaborating with the Ministry of Ecological Transition and the National Statistical Office of Spain, and especially we did this collaboration in the context of the Maya. It is important that, differently what my colleague from Germany just presented, I'm going to present the work from the academia perspective. So I'm not a ministry or a statistical office. So the work that we have done here is basically some kind of the methodological approaches, some data sources, some kind of informations and conceptual issues that we have to develop in Spain. But the accounts or the proposed accounts that I'm going to present, these are not officially published yet by any statistical office in Spain. So this will probably come later on the process, once that the EU regulations will take place, and starting in 2024, that there is an official obligation for member states to start reporting on ecosystem accounts. So this was like a kind of a preliminary work at the basis that we can build in Spain to develop these accounts. Well, as usual, in this work, the first step is to define the accounting area, and then in our case, it's including all the national territory, so all the Spanish Iberian Peninsula plus the islands. And we use the existing Spanish ecosystem classification that we developed in our national assessment. Basically, this, I cannot go into details. This is based on different national data sources and some modeled information, but we came to ecosystem classification where I'm only presenting the first two groups, that this can be disaggregated even in further levels. We also, and this is something that has been already asked, we also test how our typology of ecosystem types can be crosswalks with other existing, especially global classifications. Well, we tested with IUCN Global Ecosystem Typology, where we basically linked our ecosystem types level, what we can call level 5, with the level 3 of functional groups of IUCN. That this is what SEEA is recommended to use, the level 3 of IUCN. So this is what we did. We basically try to crosswalk our ecosystem types with the functional group, and more or less it works well. Also, there is some issues that we have to identify, because there is some typologies that IUCN are not applicable for us, and vice versa. We have some typologies of types that cannot be identified in those functional group, but more or less we did the first exercise to test how this crosswalk could do. We actually did this also with EUNIS and MICE typology, so we have all this information more or less ready. Another very important component of developing the ecosystem accounts in Spain is the data sources that we basically use to assess the changes on the ecosystem types. But basically, we rely on existing national data. So in Spain, we use this LULUCF, land use change and forest datasets for ecosystem accounting. So LULUCF provides a high spatial resolution at 25 meter per pixel information for a significant time period from 1970 to 2015. This probably will be updated, but at the moment this is the time period. And as you can see, this is a source from the Ministry of Ecological Transitions in Spain, and this is where the ministry is reporting for other international obligations as climate change mitigations and emissions. So we use this with, you can see there is the Spanish forest map, the crop and harvest map, the Greenland cover. So it's a mix from multiple data sources, but this is all tested and aggregated at national level for Spain. In terms of the accounts itself already, well, this is, this is the framework from SEEA on ecosystem accounts. And basically, in the Maya context, what we did is we more or less finalized the extent and condition accounts. This in the first states. And we still in the process of working on some ecosystem services and biodiversity accounts. So I'm going to try to give you a really fast overview of all this work that we did. In terms of extent account, we developed a methodology to test extent accounts at national level following the SEEA EA, Chapter 5, and compiling extent account for only terrestrial ecosystems. This work was published last year, so actually I leave you here the publication, so if you are interested to go into the details, please look at the publication where you can see all the models, the data sources that we used, and all the details, but I'm going to give you just kind of a very overview. So ecosystem accounts, we were able to present in the spatial and in accounting tables all the changes for all the terrestrial ecosystems for the time periods, as I said, from 1970 to 2015, and these are the reporting years where we have exact data where we could report. Just to give you a review, from 1970 to 2015, we can have the changes at 25 meter pixel resolution of the extent changes in this at national level. We also report the same for the same time periods in the extent account for all in the format of accounting tables. So where you can see for every ecosystem type identified, we have the typical accounting tables where you have the initial stacks, reduction and additions, net additions, turnovers, and etc. So we were able to publish all this information for all the ecosystems identified. Additionally, in extent accounts, we were able to also see the changes. So it's not only to report for every years, but also to understand how the flows and the change among all these ecosystem types are occurring in Spain for this time period. And as you can see, this gives you an idea of for the time period of 1970 to 2015, what has been the major change among all the ecosystem types identified or assessed in our extent accounting efforts. Okay, I'm going to move now to the condition accounts. For condition accounts, we basically follow again the methodology, the principles outlined in the SEEA EA Chapter 5. And we developed this methodology for only forest ecosystem because, well, to do this, it was quite challenging. And we started with only one ecosystem. But our idea is to further develop this in the future to other ecosystem types. So as you know, in ecosystem conditions, SEEA EA is proposing a stepwise approach where you first select ecosystem types, then the selection of indicators, then very importantly, the selection of reference areas, so we can refer every ecosystem type to reference areas. Then you go to an aggregation of a condition index where you integrate all the information, and then you report on accounting tables and maps all the information. This work is finished, and basically it's going to be because we are almost finished our revision process. So this will be very, very soon published in Environmental Minutes publication. To give you an idea, I cannot go into details. We follow the SEEA typology of indicators of biotic, and landscape as well. And to give you just an overview, we just 11 national level indicators. What you can see, there is a multi-sources, so there is from remote sensing information, from modeled information, and also from some national in-situ information that we were also capable to collect. All this information has different levels of resolution, so there is a lot of, it's very challenging on how to aggregate all of that into just one level. But we managed technically. At the end, we only report forest condition accounts for 2 time periods, for 2000 and 2015, where we were able to capture all these information sources in different time periods. So we only have for these 2 time periods. You can see the maps of the forest condition accounts at national level with different examples. We also were able to report this in accounting tables, and specifically we were basically all type of accounting tables, but basically what I'm showing here is more or less what are the major changes from 2000 to 2015 in terms of condition index, so the final product of the aggregation, and we can see in which level each of the ecosystem, the forest ecosystem types identified were in the year 2000 and the 2015, and what are the changes. So this is quite important because there is also quite a new EU regulation on ecosystem restoration that there is actually Eurostat is proposing, and the Commission is proposing to use this condition accounting as a way to identify it. Where is the need to restore, for instance, which are the most degraded ecosystem types that could be used for restoration purposes, and this can be a way to present and to use these results. Okay, I'm going to move to the ecosystem services accounts we did for this project, although in the previous national ecosystem assessment we also do some monetary evaluation, but for this we only did the biophysical side, and in previous projects, as I said, we have multiple models for ecosystem services at national levels. I'll leave you there a few publications, but here I'm going to present what we did in the context of Maya, which is we were very much focused on global climate regulation and in particular on carbon sequestration. And we divided the work based in marine ecosystems. We thought that it was very important for the first time at national level, to assess marine ecosystem carbon sequestration accounts, and we were able to do it. And this is again published from last year in Ecosystem Services. So I leave you there the publication in case you would like to read it more in details. I don't have the time to go into. This is a modeled information. Now we are working on the terrestrial carbon sequestration of ecosystems. So we are using different sources of data from global biomass and soil organic and information from the Spanish Forest Monitoring Network. So we are trying to model all the existing carbon sequestration for terrestrial as well, but we haven't finished this work. This is work under process. Finally, I would like to report also in a couple of other ecosystem services that we are exploring. These are more explorative work. One is on the aesthetic quality of the landscape. there is a methodology that has been developed in the UK and the Netherlands using artificial intelligence and social networks. And we are trying to use the same model to do it aesthetic quality predictions based on social networks and deep learning at 5 meter and 5 kilometer resolution at the national level. So we are testing these models. We have identified, conducted a national survey to generate a set of training data based on characteristics and tourism ecosystem for all the Mediterranean region. But this is not yet even finished. We are still exploring how to apply it in Spain. And finally, another thematic accounts that we are very much working on is on the biodiversity accounts. So we are valuing all species with presence in Spain, included in the Habitats and Birds Directive. And we are trying to use machine learning techniques between different years to develop some spatial information on biodiversity accounts. This is also work on the process, but...
Sorry, Fernando, can you finish in 1 more minute?
Yeah.
Because we're running a little bit late. Thanks.
Yeah, it's my last slide. Sure. So all the information that I presented here, we are promote various communications. So we are doing some ecosystem accounts explorer for Spain. So all this information, we have it ready to be distributed for stakeholders and end users. And with that, I finished here. So back to you, Sjoerd, for thanks.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Particularly, I liked the long time series for the extent account. It's really impressive. Are there any questions for Fernando? Any questions? I'm looking into the room. I see no questions. Yes, Mark.
Great job, Fernando. I know how good he is in his work. Maybe just a quick question on the clear cut, because we do know that a clear cut in forest is only a change if there is a change on the land use. So I was wondering how you deal with it. I guess it's a change in the conditions of the forest. And I was wondering which metrics you use in the conditions in order to capture this.
Yeah, this is a challenge that we have. So we were not able to, for instance, in the structural component of the forest, it was a very lack of information. So there is no much information, either modeled or remote sensing, that we could include it. So this is something that we were not able to identify. This is even identified as a data gap in there, but this is something that probably future and remote sensing, as you know, could provide us a more systematic way, and we could include it. But at the moment, it's not included.
No other questions, if I'm correct. If not, yeah, one more question by France.
Yes, congratulations also to your great work. The question is the same as before. Do you have in your team research on putting values on all of these resources, and maybe are you planning to make research to put this value in the system of national accounts, which should include wealth enlarged to biological resources?
Yeah, thanks for the questions, because I didn't say and mention it, but there is some, we are conducting together with another research institution that is more focused on the accounting, but from the monetary perspective. For the work that I just presented on forest condition accounts, we are trying to assess a monetary valuation on how much does it cost to maintain the current conditions. And for that, we are conducting a national, how do you call it, national level interview to assess how much is the willingness to maintain and to pay for the conditions, and based on that to model a kind of simulated exchange value of how much will cost to maintain the current situation of forest condition at the national level. This is work in the process, but I didn't mention it, but it will be hopefully sometime either this year or next year will be out.
Okay, thanks, Fernando. We'll move on to the last presentation before our coffee break, which is about ecosystem accounting in Estonia by Kaia Oras. Kaia Oras has been a leader in environmental statistics and accounts in Statistics Estonia for more than 10 years. She has developed sustainable development indicators, environmental statistics, and environmental accounts, both on a national and international level. Kaia is a member of the UN, the London Group, and developers of the methods for environmental accounting, expert group of environmental statistics, and Eurostat Bureau of Directors of sectoral and environmental statistics and accounts. So Kaia, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I give it a try. It was like this, yeah. Okay, yeah, I was introduced already, so Kaia, I'm a team leader for environment statistics and accounts, and also a project leader. Have been for ecosystem accounting for some years. And here, in this work, we are dependent quite a lot on, what our people in, what our stakeholders think, and what are their kind of thoughts and ideas and the wishes are. And if we look which frameworks do we have, so we have the planetary boundaries is of course something which we all know in this field we are aware of. But in addition to this like you see in the uppermost left corner, where famous Rockström graph. But on the right side up, you see that we are in one way we are over the environmental ceiling, but we are also on the economic foundation as well. So we have to take into account also the needs of a society coherently here. And this is also what is represented on a graph below, where we have a sustainable development goals in the put kind of also done by Resilience Institute, kind of arranged in a way which shows that society and economy has to fit to kind of to environmental borders. So the 4 lower sustainable development goal aims are here, the wider circle on the right bottommost graph are the land, ecosystem, climate and water. So we have to fit into it. And that's why our stakeholders have been quite interested also in the ecosystem accounting, the SEEA in general, to add kind of more kind of diversified information to all this debate, also connecting environment and ecology. So, and this is the SEEA, what our stakeholders have seen it. And okay, and on that graph we see what has been our process for 3-4 years. What we have, ecosystem accounts, what we have developed, and quite a lot with the support from 3 subsequent Eurostat grants. But I come back to this details later on. But we worked, yes, our team consists of, in one hand, statisticians, but on another hand, the main team, Tallinn Technical University. So I emphasize that we work together, science, statistics and policy in this debate are quite, it's important that we are all together in this debate. And for us, the stakeholder consultation have been very interesting, kind of very important. So we have consultation interviews and the seminars. So you see some of those reflected here on the bottom most picture as well, talking to the ministers and scientists to agree about the methods, about the services to tackle and get the clarity on these issues, as quite often we kind of figured out that we are not talking the same language, but talking about quite similar things, and also can be the opposite. But for us, I see also that cooperation has been crucial, and we have quite a lot of support and learning done from Statistics Netherlands during these years. So it's Patrick and Sjoerd and our main core team are presented here in uppermost graph. But now we also teach others. So we just had the colleagues from Slovenia. We had the consultation on ecosystem accounting and the methods how to do it. Okay, and also the knowledge initially we participated also in SEEA EA revision process, and for ecosystems also I contributed in last year's via the London group has discussed quite a lot with methodological issues, and now in Eurostat task force as well. But going to ecosystem extent account, I say that countries basically, we have two basic options. You either use international data set and adjust this to your own needs, or you prepare your spatial data set on the basis of a set of the source maps. And when we started, when there wasn't any ecosystem maps available in Estonia, so we compiled our ecosystem map. So this is our approach, but there are a lot of data out there. So more is not always better. So data to the registers are gathered for different purposes, and there are inconsistencies, for example, in ecosystem boundaries, and they are gathered in different times. So some of the data in register, you can imagine, are outdated. So there is a question, what is the actual state of these registers? And have a look at these graphs. From the register, you can get the kind of idea that you should have a forest, but actually, in reality, it's already it's an urban area already, or you should have a grassland, but then actually you have a parking lot. So this is quite often the situation with data in registers. So we had to adopt our approach accordingly. So here we list the 7 of our main registers we used, and the topographic database, which also has kind of land use types. But in order to get the kind of up-to-date ecosystem map, we had to prioritize the map layer, so which will be the uppermost, so which right over the other changes. So for us, it's agricultural land, the semi-natural habitats, maps of agricultural support system are the most important ones, and the others follow. And all together, so 3.8 million polygons, 140 different mapping units. So, okay, and initially, typology initially UNIS, when national, and now we tested IUCN crosswalk also, and now we have just sent crosswalk to EU ecosystem typology for Eurostat. So, for example, here you get the two ecosystem maps of 2019-2020, and then the conversion matrix, which shows you your red cells are the biggest changes, which are between the cropland and grasslands, as one can expect. That this is the area of the biggest changes, but there are also other changes that are of interest. Some for the changes in the classifications, what one should handle, but others are just real changes what one should take into account, and what are of interest for the politicians as well. But in an extent, what we do next is that we try to automatize the production process, so Python or R. So we will see, this is our next development with area. But we also have to now compare it to others, as the ecosystem maps are popping up in countries. So 1 second, so you can, in some countries there are more than one in additional to the one that's used in the Stats Office. So several, it can be that there are other maps you have to take into account as well. And for the classification, so as I said already, so I list here that we did first look, LULUCF was promising as a first one, but then UNIS, IUC and GET who tested, and now EU ecosystem classification. But for us, nationally, we have developed our national classification and agreed with a scientist mapping units in which classes should belong. And something that we did in addition, that is maybe not that mainstream, is that we developed also in this extent account the ownership dimension. So for each, we connected also our ecosystem map with the land cadastre and statistical enterprise register, and then we got a matrix which shows the owners, ecosystem types and the ownership. And why that one would be needed, we may ask. For example, here we have these restoration targets and maintenance of the semi-natural areas as a national target in Estonia. So these are the biodiversity-rich habitats, and you see the wooded meadows, the alluvial meadows, and the coastal meadows. So these are kind of important from a viewpoint of biodiversity and various species. So there is a target you see currently on 45,000 hectares and then to 60,000 hectares to be maintained. So these grasslands need to be maintained in order to be preserved, as otherwise these areas, at least wooded lands and alluvial meadows would turn into forest once. So they have to be managed in order to be preserved. And if you look at the now it jumps, yeah. Look at the, it's the grassland extent on a vertical dimension, and when you can see the in horizontal dimension, what are the hectares, how much is managed, you see in the red area in between, how much is currently managed and how much still needs to be managed. And then on the rightmost side, you can actually see who are the owners of these areas. So you can, for managing something, you need targeted measures. So this is something that we have been discussing with our stakeholders, what is useful, this kind of connection. So you get the information, who are the owners of this important ecosystem, and which kind of, in order to properly design the measures. And looking at the services, so we dealt quite a lot also with the services, first identifying relevant services and then also dealing with valuation methods. And here again, for us it is, we don't invent this system, we have a guidelines, but we will talk to our stakeholders and we talk to scientists in a field, looking at the methods and to see what data available in statistics. And here is a list of the services for provisioning, regulating and cultural services, what we have covered, and then the data sources, what we have used for those, and then for services, quite often you have these alternative methods to be used. So we have been discussing these methods, and as financial ministry, environmental economic ministry, we're eager to know what is the value of this economic sense of this flow of these ecosystem services. So we have made the parallel valuation, applying valuation methods for these services, and also came up with a kind of preferred method for each of the service. And parallelly, you see in the uppermost part that scientists in Estonia also use contingent valuation methods for valuation of the services. So we carried out in parallel contingent valuation method-based valuation for these services. And we have marked here with a cross in cases also the parallel results are available using the contingent valuation methods. So this is also available on a website. In end, there is a link to the report, to the kind of the discussion groups, to the tables. So it's you can have more, but 3 minutes left only. Okay, one example, wild berries. You get, evaluation with provisioning service, wild berries. You can, there's a basis for the data from official statistics, and you can have a physical data, you can apply the methods, you get the results, and there's a question how you distribute this to the ecosystem. So it's in a way, in the middle you see it's a field, and around is a forest. So on this topographic map, you see it's a provisioning of a service. It's different levels of a red color. And it's attributed to the different ecosystems based on a potential supply of these free wild berries. And okay, and this is a kind of bigger view, the same. And for example, second example of this list, pollination service. So you know how the service is defined. It's defined as a loss of it's a quantity of pollination-dependent crop potentially lost. So avoided cost method was applied, and the same area. You get the field and then pollinators around, pollinator providing ecosystems around, and with the value, this is a rapeseed field, so it's and pollination providing value is one attributed to ecosystem which have pollinators, which are the pollinators' habitats. But no time to describe this in detail. I understand 1 or 2 minutes. But these are the supply and use tables, kind of experimental supply and use tables, where you see that in Estonian case, the forest and the timber are the take cells with the highest values, but also recreation is important. We have a parallel work now as university and environmental agencies also working on valuation methods, and we will have a seminar in April to talk about what are their views of the valuation methods we apply and what are their views. So this is a work in progress, and here on the bottom right side you see kind of a famous graph of these plural values, what one could take into account when talking about the valuation. Getting to the end, this is also one someone asked about the aggregation. So if you use the aggregated values, you use the monetary values, you could aggregate. But the question always is what is the semantics of this value? So it's currently of those services for the grasslands and valued on basis of exchange values. And what do we do next? So we work still on EU typology conversion. There are still some details. So this is something which is in focus, also on physical flows of the services, and also looking at the condition indicators. And if also yesterday I talked about the indicators, what you can derive from accounts. This is also one stream of the work. And as I told already, analysis of ecosystem services valuation methods. And we start, like I told you, automatization of compilation of extent account. And we also have a prototype for map application on our website. So we also work on that one. So final thoughts. Extent account together with ownership dimension has been considered useful by the stakeholders. So typology was missing and has been done. So this is also some these works achievement, and also the crosswalks to the international classification types. And this experimental ecosystem services work has been considered useful. Also the evaluation, some ministers are really interested in this, and as also looking for the from viewpoint of aggregation, but it's now kind of question of a debate what this will bring in the future. I think it's the last slide here. It's one of picture of our discussion seminars, and a lot of links where you can read. We try to publish most of the stuff, so a dedicated website here. Yeah, so we have been suggested to try to be useful in this process by the ministry, and they see the potential of a statistical system, especially on the borderline between the economy and environment, to map out the things and to kind of make this diversify the knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was indeed a very interesting examples again, from I particularly like the examples of the wild berries in the pollination in the map. So that was a really nice example. We're running into our coffee break, but are there still some questions? We have time for one or two more questions. Armenia.
It was very interesting, really great presentation and great job done. My question is about, because we have the similar situation, about the connection of cadastre data, landowners with land cover. Do you make this connection based on special data, or you get this information from municipalities or from cadastre? How do you connect this information? Thank you.
We have cadastral data which are georeferenced, and we have ecosystem map which is georeferenced, and we connect those two. Yes. Yeah, in statistical by our team. So this is done by the I don't have her picture here, but someone in our team. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, France.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the carbon sequestration value? Is there any specific price of carbon that you use? Is it fixed by the states or by research team? And what is the price and what is the whole value of sequestration assets in your country?
How it's carbon ETS carbon price, and how it's distributed it's based on the forest increment. And forest increment is a spatial data. So, and the value per ton of carbon is from the ETS.
Azerbaijan.
My question is, how do you lease My question is, thank you for your slide, and my question is, how do you lease ecosystem services? Because it seems to have endless services in the forest, and how do you contribute all of this?
Set the criteria. We talked to our stakeholders. We looked at the sizes. Of course, for the services. So this was the basis. And when we talked to our stakeholders and our scientists, we had a kind of a meeting when everyone could, we described, everyone could show their opinion. So we sent it in written. And here you see there is a small table up there. So there were criteria how to take everyone's position into account. And then and also the data availability was an important aspect. But if no data, it could be a nice integrate service, but you can't, you really can't measure it. But so we try, so very kind of rare services were not actually taken, didn't get that much of a points, but in general, it was a kind of a statistical survey in a way to get this list together. But yeah, but mainly it's restricted by the availability of methods and data. So it's, as we saw, these are kind of, there are no actually very rare indicators here. It is still the same things which are calculated by most of it. There are some actually rare stuff like wild game and wild berries, like you mentioned, that's nice. And there was aesthetic experience and those aspects ensuring glance. So there were some kind of rare stuff as well in here.
Okay, thanks. Time for a coffee break. So after the coffee break, we'll continue with presentations by Janwar and Paulo. So, but please be back in 50 minutes, 20 minutes past 11.
So I went no, I didn't. I
no, it's okay. Later. Yeah, you started a little bit later, so that's okay. Yeah.
So too much pictures? No.
No, it was nice. Yeah. I like the pictures. I haven't seen them before.
1, 2, 3, test. 1, 2, 3, test.
Est-ce que
Welcome back, everybody. We have to start. Please take your seats. We'll continue with our session on ecosystem accounting. And first, we have two presentations by Jean-Louis and Paulo. But first, we start with Jean-Louis. I'm very happy that you're here. Well, I think most of you know Jean-Louis. Jean-Louis Weber is an international consultant on ecosystem natural capital accounting, the author of the Ecosystem Natural Capital Accounting, the Quick Start Package, published by the Convention of Biological Diversity in 2014, author of the tutorial Kangaroo Ecosystem Accounting, scientific advisor of several projects, ecosystem natural capital accounts, implementing, including Mauritius, Ron River catchment, and the Entrema Madagascar, WEF Eco-CEO, Guiana Shield, etc., etc. Former senior advisor to the European Environmental Agency, the EEA representative to the UN Committee of Experts on Economic Environmental Accounting, member of the EEA Scientific Committee, honorary professor, scholar of geography at the University of Nottingham. Probably this is not the short list of your bio. I'm very pleased that you're here, Jean-Louis. Well, you did. I know you personally for quite a long time, and I remember all the enthusiastic presentations you had also in the London group on ecosystem accounting. You were, of course, one of the pioneers in this field. So I'm very happy to hear that you're here. So the floor is yours for your presentation.
So, thank you, Sjoerd, and thank you to the organizers for this invitation to come back in this place, and which is a very important place because it's there that the environmental statistics were born in somehow in 1979, and it's there when the first ecosystem accounting project has been launched. It was something like 1982, if I remember, at the time of where the officer in charge of this statistic here was Andreas Kannert, who has played a very important role there. So for me, it's something special to be here. So I will speak of. So it's. Thank you so much for your help. So I will speak of a project which is called Ecosystem Natural Capital Accounts for Africa. And first of all, what is Ecosystem Natural Capital Accounts? It's a methodology which was commissioned by the Secretariat of the CBD to support the fast implementation of the SEEA ecosystem as a consequence of the strategy of IT of the CBD. So it has been developed to some extent in relation and in parallel. So in order to avoid any useless misunderstanding, I try to compare the two systems. And for the biophysical side, let's say extent and condition accounts, the two frameworks are very compatible. We'll see in detail what it means. For the ecosystem service, it's also the same kind of data, the same kind of service that you can find. It means that if one is working more on the side of ENCA quick start package or more on the SEEA, basically it's the same data set and so on, and cooperation is absolutely possible, and it's easy to cooperate. Where the systems are a bit different is that in terms of integration of the accounts, the integration of the accounts for the SEEA is made on the basis of ecosystem service valuation, and integration of the ecosystem considered as an asset and measured in money. This is not the approach which is taken in ENCA. In ENCA, the integration is done in biophysical terms. So it's not the service, it's the systems, their productivity and resilience, which is considered, and a special aggregate is produced, which is called ecosystem capability account. Capability, it means capacity to produce whatever service. And considering what is the state of the system, the condition of the system, and trying to measure the degradation. It's very oriented to the degradation. So when we come to the monetary part, which is not yet addressed in ENCA, but it's defined in the ENCA guidelines, the idea is to go to the measurement of what is needed, the costs which are needed to maintain or to restore the ecosystems. So, so when you come to the monetary part, you may have some differences. So how it works, ENCA. So there were some remarks by our German colleague about the difficulty to integrate and regarding the biotic capital, the question put by the French delegate. And so we have decided to deal with that. And this aggregation is the aggregation of a set of tables, which are so very common to ENCA and to the SEEA, the land cover extent. In ENCA, we have in addition the length of the rivers, which is added to the land cover extent, and then three accounts: biocarbon account, water account, and ecosystem infrastructure integrity accounts. As simple as possible. And in biocarbon and water, basically it's material flow accounts. So we have stocks with all the details. We have the flows, including the natural flows and the use flows. So we can connect to the supply and use tables in physical terms, which are in the SEEA central framework. So we do that for the biocarbon, we do that for the water. And then we come to some specific aggregate of potential for so the quantities which can be delivered by the system, their potential in carbon or in cubic meters. And we have a potential for the infrastructure, which is measured a little bit differently as a distance to target to a reference year. And the reference year is 1990. Thank you so much for the European Space Agency for the long-term series which has been produced and that we can work from that. And then you have the bottom of the table, so the first row of colored tables, we have indexes which correspond to the condition accounts of the SEEA. And these indexes are for part one index of sustainable use with no depletion, and then health indicators, and which is medical approach. And we can, here we embark what we have as indicators of health, which can be, for example, in the case of biocarbon, the change in the age of the forest. The old forests are better in ecological terms than the young plantations. For water, it would be pollution of water. For infrastructure, it will be species biodiversity. It will be vulnerability to droughts, to fire, or whatever we can observe. So we are making diagnosis in this case. These indicators, A2, B2, C2, they are taken and they are simply averaged in order to calculate with a composite index, which has the status of a currency, what we call ecosystem capability unit, to calculate, to measure an ecological value. So we have the equivalent of a price that we do. And so, of course, it's conventional, and the choice that we have made is to do it, because at one moment, if not, we go always to money. And we want to, not at this stage, not to go to money directly. So we need to produce. And the solution is to make it as simple as possible, so that the users understand a little bit what it's about. So we try to keep it simple, and we accept the constraint, the limit, and if it's used, it will work, and it will be okay. Then we can calculate, we have the potential for the three accounts, carbon, water, infrastructure, and we can calculate their capability with the same currency. And then, so we have a carbon capability, water capability, ecosystem infrastructure capability. And the interest of that is that we have always the three dimension all together. And we can add up, but it means that, let's imagine that we are in a situation where to make carbon sequestration, we plant a lot of fast-growing trees, which are making carbon quite quickly. We know that it's at the expense of water, because generally this plantation is pumping a lot of water, and it's at the expense of biodiversity. So by having the three components all together, we avoid saying, wow, we are very successful in our environmental policy when we have increased the carbon at the expense of water and biodiversity. So this is the rationale. So now, I have lost. Sjoerd, can you give me the full screen, please? So I will start to speak of that's good. I need you. Huh? Next time I will insist that you. So no, I want to go to. That's okay. So I will speak to you of a project. So they have 6 or 7 or 8. I don't know exactly the number of application of this methodology to date. But there is an important project which has been finalized end of November. Results presented at the COP on biodiversity in Montreal in December, and which is called Africanca. And Africanca is the first step of a project which aims at being developed by countries. But in order to frame the broad picture, we have decided to have a continental approach before going to 6. There are 6 countries participating in a project called Copernicea, and which is run by the Observatory of Sahara and Sahel. Observatory of Sahara and Sahel is an international organization which includes 26 African countries. It's quite the north part of Africa, plus 7 non-African countries, including Germany, Luxembourg, Switzerland, France, Canada, I forgot some of us, and 13 member organizations, including FAO, the Convention on Desertification, of course, and regional bodies and NGOs. So this project is to develop accounts for Africa. And you see that what I have presented you very quickly, we have produced land cover accounts, thanks again to European Space Agency, and then biocarbon accounts, water accounts, infrastructure, ecosystem infrastructure accounts, and we have produced the synthesis. This is on the right part in purple tints, is the total ecosystem capability. So you have the full set of accounts has been produced. There's an example of a table. And what is important is that the statistical unit to producing these accounts, we call it ecosystem socio-ecological landscape unit, and there are more or less 200,000, a little bit more for all Africa, and the full set of accounts is produced for each of these units. So it's not yet local information, but it's a gateway from the global, from the continental approach, to the locals. It means that for all these units, you have a full set of accounts, and that if you want to develop then with specific detail, because there is an issue there, you want to develop accounts in a particular place, you have immediately the context. And one element that I skipped, which is important, is that also we have produced accounts for 13 years, 2001, 2005, and 2010 to 2020 annually. And why we did that is because from a previous experience on the Guiana Shield, where we had only 2 years, we realized that we are very independent for interpreting the change on the meteorology. So you have dry years, wet years, and so on. So if you, to interpret the change, to see there is degradation, you cannot take 2 years at random. You need to look at the time series. So this is important. And if you take 2 years, you need to know which are to make sure that these years are typical. They are not biased by any problem. So this is an example of indicators which are derived. So we have in 3 minutes. Well, so we have indicators by these elementary units. We can aggregate by river basins at different levels and to produce accounts. And you see that example of for forested units, you have the types of forest according to the IUCN, USGS typology. We have used the USGS data for that. And then you have the above ground tree carbon, net primary production, the trends at several dates, and we see what is in red on this map in the middle. It means that it's constantly decreasing value. You have the carbon ecosystem capability change between two dates, beginning and end of period. And you see that in the center part, it's the green colors are good, and the yellow and red are bad. And if you look at biodiversity trend, is the contrary. I would say the humid forests are still resisting, considering this particular indicator. Then we can produce indicators with a different breakdown. For example, we made an assessment for 1 dozen of emblematic species to see the parks, where they are vulnerable or endangered, and how are these parks behaving. And you see, for example, that you have a very contrasted situation. So I think that this is extremely useful for managing biodiversity. Example of data that we have used 50 international data sets which have been integrated, pre-processed, and they will be made available on the platform, which is being, it will be launched in a few weeks of time by the OSS. And so you have the time series, reprocessed, made compatible for accounting. And you have the land cover I mentioned, the fire, also the fire, it's also SCCI, the occurrence of water. Statistics, we have used the FAO data and the FAO maps by grids. You have some products at FAO on the FAO website called SPAM, so for vegetal crops and also for livestock. Population data to calculate water consumption, net primary production by Copernicus, the erosion combining several databases, which are some of them have been mentioned, and the wood removals, and so on. We have some tables which are additive tables for CO2 emissions from biomass, and so. So this is what we have used. So where we are now, and I will finish in 2 slides. If you 1 minute and a half. Sure. So now we are going to the countries. And when going to the countries, I've listened a lot of very interesting presentations. It's exactly what we foresee. We know that the countries, for example, there is something similar which has been done in Guinea-Conakry, and which has been done in Germany. But of course, the landscapes are a bit different. So, and we know that even in this case, we will have data that we cannot directly compare like that. And we knew that there is a constraint in terms of availability of the data at the national level, even at the level of parks. There is a big variability of issues, variability of conditions. We have the Sahara, we have the wet forest, and so on. So we have this African framework. So now we have started to work with the countries so that we want them to produce their own accounts. And not to give them, it's not a black box, it's transparent methodology, and we want the countries to be able to produce their own accounts. If not, they will not use. Now, this is a strong belief that we have in this project. For that, we use the Kangaroo ecosystem. Kangaroo ecosystem, maybe in the room, we have maybe 7 or 8 persons who have followed a little bit of the Kangaroo, at least the first week of the Kangaroo. We have trained more or less 100 persons so far, and we have done that centrally, and then we are repeating it country by country because we want create real capacities. And there is a platform that you see the scheme. It's a platform CIS4NK developed by Vito, which is a Belgian huge consultancy. And this platform is to have a semi-automated production of the accounts. And the training for this platform for the countries will be done in May. Other project in Africa, I spoke of Guinea, Gabon is done by IUCN and WWF, parks in Republic of Guinea and Senegal by IUCN and Vito. In Madagascar, several protected areas, Mauritius, Kenya by IUCN and ONF International, continuation of a program in another zone for parks and so on. So you have several projects that we try to coordinate. And it works quite well. The people are of very goodwill, and we have a permanent exchange. We invite each other to our events, and we exchange the data in order to be more efficient. I finished. I had to speak also of a previous project. So just look at the nice picture. You can go to the website and find that. It was a project which was run 2 or 3 years ago for the Guiana Shield. And what is specific in this project is that they have a more detailed land cover than we use for Africa, and which was focused on identifying gold mining and the impacts of gold mining. So we have direct impact, deforestation is brutal, pollution of the rivers. We have measured the pollution of the rivers due to gold mining. We have modeled, not measured, but we have done. And then you have development of agriculture and all that. And you see this Guiana Shield is the richest area in the world in terms of biodiversity. And you see what is happening there. And so the full set of accounts has been produced and is made available by the WWF. I just finished.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jean-Louis. Very interesting presentation. Are there any questions? Kaia.
So, thank you for the presentation. So it's we know that the valuation issues are actually of quite a debate and question. But tell us how you on which basis you do the aggregation to these EQs, these capability units. So you have these different, like you had these different assets or production streams, like the crop production, and then you have this water provisioning, and how you do this aggregation inside one demand and between the demands, and how do you end on this aggregate? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The idea is that the accounting model, which is a set of tables presently available on a spreadsheet with all the equations, but this set of tables can be implemented for the continent, at the country level, for parks, we have experience, even for small parks in Madagascar, very small, and we would like to go to the cadastral level, to the company level, with the same framework. Of course, at each level, we will have different data. For Africa, we use the international data set. When we go to assume a farm wants to make their own account, they will use data very specific to the farm with variables. So it's a bit of fractal vision of the things, and knowing that we don't need to do all the very detailed accounts on the planet. We need to have a broad vision and to combine, to do detailed accounts where it matters. This is the idea. And this aggregation is done, first of all, we have 3 material balances, material and land. Carbon, water, and the infrastructure, which is land with some weighting factors according to the high natural value, fragmentation, and so on. Things that which are somewhere in the condition accounts. So it's not something very different, in fact. Presentation is a bit different. So we have that, and the problem is to aggregate that, and we need a common unit to aggregate that. And this common unit is a unit of, I say, performance of a system or resilience of a system, which take into account the sustainability of use, and then health factors of the system. And health is like the doctor. The doctor is making the best diagnosis with the information that he or she has. There is no list of symptoms. There is some methodology, some knowledge, a lot of things, various level of knowledge, but this is like that. And then we can propose an aggregation which has many advantages in terms of operationality and so. And to go to monetary valuation, so we can develop ecosystem service accounts on top of that, because you have quite a detailed database available. It will be made available. 200 gigabytes of data will be on the website of the Observatory of Solar and Cell. But then, the idea is to go to measure restoration cost, unpaid degradation, which is we don't pay all the cost of our consumption. So the idea is to go in this way, while the SEEA is going to asset valuation, which is, but it's two different things, and there is a big common area where we can progress together.
Okay, thanks. I saw one more question, but is it a short question because we're running a bit of time?
I will do a short response.
Okay, short response, short question.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. It's the same kind of question, but I'm not sure I understand how you add cubic meters, tons of carbons, and square hectares of lands. And my sub-question is, why don't you use global footprint type methodology, which is kind of finding an equivalent scale economic value to compare the different types of square meters, which they call global hectares?
Accounts will produce balance sheets. Next step, we'll produce balance sheets in ecosystem capability unit, biophysical balance sheets. And then we'll have to take into account the footprint, of course, because you have the direct use and the indirect use via the consumption. So we thought about the ecological footprint. The ecological footprint as it is very much and too much targeted to the carbon issue. So it's a bit unidimensional. If you look in detail, there's the biocapacity of the ecological footprint. It means that it's carbon accounts presented in surface. What we do is different. I promise to be short, too short, but there is a poster, and there will be, if you have time during your lunch, if you can spare a few minutes, we can discuss about it. In French.
Thanks again, Jean-Louis. Now we'll move to the last presentation of this session, which is on land cover global data collection by Paulo. Let me briefly introduce Paulo. Paulo is based in Rome, serving the FAO of the United Nations as a lead environmental resource economist at the Office of the Chief Scientist. He's responsible for coordinating and mainstreaming the SEEA across the FAO strategic framework. Past positions include UN Environment, the World Bank, Johns Hopkins University, ENI, the World Business Council of Sustainable Development, and the Prince Albert Foundation. He has field experience working in Europe, Middle East, Africa, the Caucasus, small island developing states, and the Americas. So that basically, I think, covers almost our world. So Paulo, the floor is yours.
Chairman, thank you. Well, thank you so much. Yes, I had the fortunate. I was so lucky in the past to have been working most of the time where things and where I could be of added value in terms of my expertise. Now I'm based in Roma, and here today I am discussing and flagging with you this issue about land cover global data collection and our views discussed also with the partners of OECD. Miriam is here, the colleagues in New York, Bran and others, Michael, and all this is ongoing discussion, and your input and contributions are mostly welcome. Nothing is written on stone. So I'm going to propose to structure my brief talk around two components. So one has to do with the land cover data collection and the challenges and opportunities we may find there. But at the same time, I want to discuss and talk with you the purpose of the exercise. And the purpose for exercise, in my view as an economist, and I'd like to challenge you to think along with that, is that data is feeding and supporting decision-making, either in the private sector, either in the public sector, including land use planning, including budgets, proposals, taxation, subsidies, but also investment and finance that nobody has spoken so far here. Finance and global finance, sustainable finance, carbon finance, biodiversity finance, restoration finance, you name it. It's very important. The colleagues from IMF are here, and they are also an important, let's say, element and engine in bringing forward the discussion and the narrative along those lines. So this is ça va sans dire. It's basically the definition of the land, but what I would like to ask you, the attention is to see it as a priority account in the SEEA, but at the same time discussing how national land cover maps are fundamental as a stepping stone towards compiling consistent accounts. So I'm not, like Marco here, an expert in Earth observation systems, or not like Michael here and most of you on statistics, but this is an exercise. We have to do it differently as we've done so far, at least in FAO, I speak for my organization, where collecting data needs to be some innovation, how to do that. And how to do that with the countries, because it's not an exercise standing alone. So put everything together. So basically, the national land cover and land use maps constitute this core input for the computer and putting together national ecosystem accounting. But at the same time, such products are rarely produced on a country on a regular basis, and if they are done, most of the time there is no standardization. And this is from the perspective of the country. From a global perspective, there are today more than ever several existing global databases, but there is few dialogue between the databases and between the databases and the country level. Okay, Invest as platform, ARIS as platform, and there are many others doing those kinds of exercises. But these exercises, in my view, to discuss with you, there's few dialogue between the two domains, the country domain and the global domain. At the same time, we also have this lack of data. This has been discussed here before. I'm not an expert, but there's also lots of techniques how to compute data in that scarcity context. But this element can be an important limiting factor in the National Statistical Office in production of official land cover statistics. So it's basically somehow a schizophrenic world. So in this case, Earth observation systems that have such a capability to embrace this schizophrenic situation and produce information relatively fast to areas where they are not existing, but at the same time they are not articulated, the methods, they are not target and participated with the countries. So it creates also a sort of difficulty for the member countries to deal with such rich data set and rich creation of information methodologies. This is where we stand. So basically, taking into account this situation, they are not, as majority of the countries, are not able to report on ecosystem service account using national land cover maps. This is the situation. So the latest assessment we have, we just confirmed this with the colleagues from UNSD, we have 29 countries who have compiled land accounts, which is quite, let's say, that one, not satisfactory. So what do we propose? So there have been a set of meetings by the United Nations Committee of Experts on Environment and Accounting, how to embrace and how to move forward in this context. And the idea is to address the problems I said before. And we had recently a follow-up on this matter with the colleagues from OECD and from the colleagues of UNSD, and the invitation is extended to all of you here, including the United Nations Economic Commission for here in Europe and others, is how to launch a new process of moving forward with developing an articulated global database with a national SEEA land cover accounts. And do not reinvent the wheel. I heard this before by Bawat and others. So what could we do next, okay? So the idea is to look at this nationally articulated /participatory global land cover data collection and validation. The long, let's say, title or acronym, but is important to dissecate the different parts. The first is that the national countries or the member states need to be involved. Jean-Louis Weber mentioned here about briefly that if the countries are not involved in data collection, it will be difficult to have them involved in participating in terms of ownership of the data. But if you go to speak with the central bank and the Minister of Economics or Economy and Finance in a country, or the investor in that country, and the data is not validated from the country, you can be the Ferrari or the Williams or the Red Bull of the situation. Nobody is going to talk to you. No, not to talk to you. Your impact of your narrative will be slightly different and lower. And this has to do with the fact how this land cover data and can be validated by the countries. In that case, we think that we need we need more than three, but at least there's three pillars in terms of participatory contribution among the work. One has to do with Earth observation and statistical science group. And the idea here, with all the respect for the participants here, is not to say that I have some my doubts, that you do some work and you are the expert in this work, but you have to do this work tailored to the needs of the other partner. In particular, in this case, Earth observation scientists need to work with statistical officers or scientists as well, because this is also science, and understand the needs of the statistical domain and tailor their methodologies for the needs of statisticians. What I call a science-to-science dialogue. So it's not saying that I'm done and you take it. No. We sit together and we cook the recipe together from moment zero. But this dialogue also involves another important stakeholder, which are the governments, but not only, or national agencies, but not only the Statistical Office. The Statistical Office is an important element here. And why is that? Because the exercise here is aiming at alleviating data collection and burden for each country. So the idea is that this exercise is aimed for bringing the country with their own data. And the countries are the only players that have a saying in the validation of the country at the national level. It's a sort of ground truthing or validation exercise. So we need to have this very clear. At FAO, where I work for the last 6 years, I get amazed how the statistical process in the FAO is processed, because all the data that you read in the statistical books or tables from FAO is validated from Azerbaijan, from Austria, from Croatia, from Moldavia, from Italy. Okay, it's not a question of having the most Earth observation systems and putting data on FAO. It is validated by the member countries. And the second element, and this is the one I like to draw your attention as well, we are not doing this an exercise, an academic exercise, or on dit en français l'art pour l'art, but it is an exercise that is aimed to provide reliable and relevant data for informing policymakers and investors. So it's science to policy dialogue. So this exercise is meant with a specific goal. And this asks all of us, and I'm not going into detail, to move away from your comfort zone. It brings opportunities and also some elements to take into account. I'll go that into detail because I'm buzzed here that I have to wrap things up. But this, I go to the part I like the most, which is the part I have comparative advantage, has to do with the policy frameworks, okay? And I'm going to shed light with you or discuss with you where we can find elements of inspiration to tag our work with. So, how land is covered and used and how it changes over time and the extent of land cover degradation is key to monitor progress and therefore inform the return of investment, because no investor is going to put money or effort or energy without knowing exactly what is the return of the effort of that energy, and therefore monitoring is important. So we have SDG indicator like the 15, which is important to us. We have just now the new or the recently approved global biodiversity framework. We have important, let's say, indicators where need to be monitored. So we can help those colleagues there. Also to do with the Paris Agreement and the issues related on climate change. We have this UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration led by FAO and the United Nations Environmental Programme, where these indicators can be also of interest, indicators on information based on SEEA. And you move forward in other aspects of the climate change and desertification, the Great Green Wall Initiative and this task force on nature-related financial disclosures, because more than ever, my friends and colleagues, the work that is done on statistics is very important for the private sector. I just ask you to reflect, apologize, on one thing. Our countries, like France, Italy, or United States, Norway, they every year they issue public debt. Public debt is a loan of the country, public sovereignty, on giving and the promise to have a return. That equity and the risk on that equity is completely null. It's absent relatively to the natural infrastructure of the country. It's completely absent. It's insane. So these elements need somehow sooner than later to be brought into the picture, and the work that it does, this statistical group can shed information on. Now I'll go to a bit, and then I conclude, Mr. Chair, about economic valuation. This is done in 2008, before Nagoya, because the European Commission was leading the TIB action, and we tried to do the first steps in doing economic valuation of negative impact from land degradation on ecosystem extent, conditions, services, and the relation to national economies and relevant policies. This is almost like a vintage, because people can do it much better now in terms of the... But the thing is, we were able, back on there and still today, to signal to policymakers that inaction is associated with a monetary or with a welfare loss, and therefore you can monetize that. And we did that first for the European Commission in 2010, and then we published all that. But I just want to spend some time with you, and I apologize for the graph, which is really the worst I could possibly get. Even myself need to have glasses on this. But I just have to say to you, we use input-output tables, and we do the computer genetically model, and we plug into these, let's say, architecture used by macroeconomists, elements related to climate, including biodiversity, and including, in this case, carbon and recreation. So these are the columns. And on the left-hand side, they're just the names of the world regions. But what I want to say to you is that we did the projections between that moment and 2050, and there is a wide distribution of impact. So some people get better off, some people get worse off, and some people get better off in carbon retention, people get worse off in recreation, and some people get worse and better off in wood forest products. But what I want to say to you is this little number there. This little number there, with all the respect for that little number and the associated, let's say, or recall uncertainties relative to estimates, is about $20 trillion over a period of, it was 40 years, which is basically about the GDP of USA. So not speaking about peanuts, about an economy, so the number itself, I'm not making so much fuss about it. It's also about the distribution of the money. But in any case, we're talking about significant amount of money that is being brought into the picture by those, just for forests, on those three heads: carbon, wood forest products, and recreation. Passive value, I don't talk too much about it, but I don't want to speak about it because too much scrutiny. But I want to say there is not, it's significant, statistically significant, the changes on welfare if we don't do anything. So basically, and I concluded this one, we're starting as we speak to try to see how could we help to moving forward in the compilation of this national articulated participative global land cover data collection. So we're going to develop questionnaires. So we have questionnaires being and discussed among all of us. We need a group of the expert committee of the UN SEEA. We are now setting up the process, including the review of course among countries to these international data sets. Again, everybody is invited. We try to test this in selected countries, in selected accounts, because we cannot do everything at the same time. Agree on estimation methodology. So, for example, we can propose pre-filling a questionnaire. So we can have some Earth observation information, propose it in the questionnaire, and with working with the local, with the national offices, fulfilling that and starting the data collection. And also support the countries for capacity development. I'll add my last one, saying that all this process in terms of selection, where to do, should be, in my view, as much as possible connected to the policy process. Because data has demand, the value of the data is highest where the demand is the highest. So it's not a question of intellectual prostitution whatsoever, it's a question of opportunity, because taxpayers' money are limited, and if you have to do something with a limited amount of money as available to you, let's do it where the returns of that public investment and public money is the highest. I thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for taking a bit longer than I should do to you.
Thank you, Paulo. Thank you for this presentation. We're running a little late on time, but there's room maybe for one question. Is there any question from the audience? One question? No, I see no questions. If not, then we'll move to the last part of this session. As I mentioned, we are running a little bit over time, so we'll take maybe 15 minutes of the lunch break, but I think hopefully that's okay. So now we'll have a panel discussion, and I would like to invite Simon, is already here, Kaia is coming, and William Speller from UNEP for this panel discussion. No, you can go back. Yeah. So basically what we're going to do is we have prepared some general questions that I would like the panelists to reflect on. But before I start with my first question, let me first introduce the panelist that has not been up here yet. So William Speller. He is an environment economist of UNEP. He works he has worked on the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity initiative, the TEEP, and the policy application of SEEA EA ecosystem accounts. He has supported countries, including South Africa, India, and China, on using SEEA ecosystem accounts for policy scenario analysis and led the development of a global guidance document on the same topic. So very welcome. We have several questions that I want the panelists to reflect on. But of course, I also would like to involve the audience. If you want to add something after each question, you can, of course, also do that. The first question, and I will start with you, William, because you're up here for the first time. So a key question is, of course, what are the key challenges for implementing SEEA EA that you have faced in your experience, and also what did you do to overcome them? You've just read your bio, and you have worked with several countries. So maybe you could reflect on this. What are the key challenges that you've faced?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so I've worked in several countries. I've done a lot of work in Africa, supporting countries in their implementation or starting the implementation of SEEA. And some of the main challenges that I reflected on before coming up here were actually mentioned by Paulo, so we'll echo some of what he said. But I think I would highlight maybe three in the first instance. The first one is getting that policy pull for the data. So we kind of have a data push that comes from the statistical community that produces the compilers of accounts, but it's very important also to have that policy pull, so the demand from policymakers. And that is in large part contingent on the understanding of policymakers of what SEEA accounts are and what they can deliver for in terms of their policy making. And for those of us in the room who are familiar, it can be relatively easy, but for a policymaker, say for an official from the Ministry of Environment is relatively new to this domain, wading through the acronyms of SEEA, ENCA, QNS, TEEB, NCA, Comprehensive Wealth of Nations, Inclusive Wealth Index, that can be quite daunting. So I think sort of capacity building to understand that terrain and what SEEA in particular SEEA ecosystem accounts are and what they can deliver is extremely important. The second one I would mention is, how we speak about monetary accounts, because I think that still in some settings remains a controversial area. Not everyone is on board with the concept of monetary valuation of ecosystem services. And I think that it's important we have an open conversation about that, that we, recognize what the monetary accounts are, that those are just one framing of values and that there are many different value systems that are important, that we're not trying to put a price on nature, we're not trying to commodify. This is about recognizing the value of services that nature provides. And I think, making clear that the role that monetary accounts can play in terms of cost-benefit analysis, measuring the effectiveness of policies is very important. And then maybe I'll stop after this, but finally on that point, I think also recognizing that if countries don't wish at this stage to proceed with monetary accounts in the SEEA ecosystem accounting framework, there's already a huge amount of information and benefit that can be done just through developing the extent, condition, and service accounts in physical terms.
Particularly about evaluation, that's also something we're struggling with. Kaia, let me now turn to you. The same question to you. Of course, where you've just presented the ecosystem accounting in Estonia, what are the key challenges that you have over the past years have met with regard to implementing SEEA in Estonia, SEEA ecosystem accounting in Estonia?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I should admit that when we actually started, the SEEA EA was not adopted yet. So we had this SEEA EA revision process, and there was even more open questions when we do nowadays. So now it's big part of it of extent and physical accounts is now like as a standard. So evaluation is like in a format of a guidelines. But this international standard in Europe is translated to kind of in a process of translation to the EU legislation. So where it's also the more clarity for the countries is coming. But so the whole area, the novelty of the whole area is one challenge. So you need in stats offices, when you start this work, you need kind of quite highly qualified staff to do the work. This is something which is for sure that what you need. So the novelty of the area. And if you work on local level, you also face the situation when people in ministry and scientists feel that the world level and even European level accounts indicators derived from them are still not enough for these policies on local level. So it's not the not the whole work you have to make, like we talked here today, that it has to be usable also in municipalities where lots of decisions are made about this ecosystem condition and how to preserve the good ecosystems in good condition. So in that sense, there is still one kind of a big step to take in future. So, and but making it operable on a national level is important. When it's and it will be the work will be recognized, and the ecosystem accounting approach could fly. Thank you.
Finally, Simon, in your presentation you also already reflected a bit on that, but maybe you can add something.
Yes, sure, but it can be rather quick since, as you said, I already touched upon it, but I think the overall challenge has been data heterogeneity and harmonization. So as you might know, we have a federal structure in our country, so a lot of the data we rely on specific ecosystems comes from the federal states, and the methods sometimes differ, or the reporting, how they collect data. And so getting this together, sometimes you would really have to ring by phone 15 offices and ask where they've started or if they were willing to send it to you. And and then also see at which stage can you actually aggregate it or not. So this is a bit a specific federal problem. But then also like the various reporting system I touched upon, like from especially in the field of water, and with the reporting period of 6 years they have and the 3 years. So this is something we want to tackle in the future. And also remote sensing, I think we were quite positive, since the good thing is you have country covering the whole country available. So this is always a good thing. But then also the continuity of products and also the quality. So we had one product like the small woody features from the Copernicus program, where just it's not of such high quality that we can rely on it yet, which has to do, of course, with the resolution and like technical stuff. But there we are looking forward that products increase in quality in the future.
Thanks. Is there anybody from the audience who would also like to reflect on this question? Maybe some national experience that you want to share with the challenges you face with implementing ecosystem accounting? I don't see anything. No. Okay. Then let's move on to the next question, which is about the institutional setting for implementing ecosystem accounts. Of course, how you organize this in your country on a national scale. Often what you see, of course, you need some special experience, and this, of course, is a statistical framework, so it's also thrown at the statistical institutes, but of course, it's very specialized, so you need also some help and some organization with that regard. So let me now first turn to Kaia. Can you tell us a little bit how you have organized this in your country?
Okay, as I already told you, told you in my presentation, that for us the cooperation actually is crucial. We didn't plan this from the very beginning as a kind of standalone exercise, accounts for the sake of accounts. So in that sense, we have seen this as stakeholders, stats offices and the scientist kind of not dialogue but a trialogue, and we have been working together in this field. But yes, the responsibility, as it's a statistical product, the responsibility is on Stats Office. So you have to ensure that it's kind of credible in a way what is produced, and for that you need this continuous cooperation. And also what people in Ministry of Nature Protection Division say, that this is our common responsibility of a land habitat, the country habitat, and we preserve, like I said earlier before, or mentioned before, of a good condition of ecosystem. So this is also one of the tools. SEEA EA is one of the tools, and this is tool which is in hands of Stats offices. So we should use this tool to contribute to this end. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Will, same question to you. You've worked with a lot of countries. How important is this institutional setting?
Yeah, it's extremely important. One of the countries that I worked with is South Africa, and that's always a good case that I like to kind of share, is that they have now developed a 10-year NCA strategy. So it's strategy for the development of accounts and integration of policy, the roles of different organizations over the next 10 years. They have a national NCA strategic advisory group. So that's a kind of organizational structure that brings together the relevant stakeholders in one setting to discuss. They have a very interesting way of treating the development of accounts as sort of a national journey of co-creation, also sort of bringing in youth groups, bringing in a variety of stakeholders, and using it as a vehicle to discuss not only the development of accounts, but also what the country's vision is for its environment and conservation. So I think that's a really interesting example that, if you're not aware, it's worth looking into.
Oh, there's something on the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. So there's a comment also from the chat, which I think is quite useful, from our colleague Raul Figueroa Diaz from Mexico. He just wanted to comment on their experience. He says, for us in Mexico, the implementation of the SEEA has depended mainly on the will to do the work. There are no longer the same difficulties of years ago, such as lack of resources, lack of technical capabilities, etc. He says, today, with the triumph of communications, we can take the best practices from all countries. We have the support of international organizations, and within the country, we see the authorities of the economic and environmental sector more committed to developing this type of account.
Thanks. That was also a useful contribution. Finally, Simon, with regard to this question, the institutional setting.
Yes. So, yeah, we are lucky that we got resources for a relatively large team, and also for several years funding since 2020. So, and also, I think what was important for us was the adoption of the SEEA EA by the Statistical Commission, because then we had something in our hands to go to the other offices, like especially the Environmental Agency, which were perhaps a bit surprised that we started the work on it, where we, of course, are not the natural ones who have the expertise. But then we just said, well, it's a statistical system, and yeah, then it's kind of natural that we should start on it, and we were quite transparent and had a lot of work with several stakeholders. So I think in the first 2 years, we had basically every week an online meeting with data providers or potential data providers, first explaining 20 minutes what was our aim, why we needed their data, and we're quite open about our aims. And I think when you do that and take the work, most of the data holders, they were quite positive, and we could establish a good cooperation. So yeah, so basically we do the work at the Statistical Office.
Thanks. Anyone from the audience who would also like to reflect on this? Maybe some experience there, implementing ecosystem accounting and also the institutional setting? No? Okay, let me then turn to the next question. I think it's a very important one. It's about of course, the link to policy and how it can be used by policy. So the question is basically, could you give an example from your own work experience where SEEA EA data have been useful for informing policy? Well, SEEA is of course still very new, but of course, well, several countries are implementing it, and is it now already really used in policy? Well, Simon, now you're the first to reflect on this.
Okay. Well, as I said, we started with the extended account, and that is, of course, not the account you do your policy conclusions on, so especially because there's already land cover data out there, at least in Germany. So, but I think what we aim for is, well, I think we have two aims, basically. One is to provide disaggregated data for applied researchers, so that really giving data out there and say, well, if you have interesting stuff which goes beyond the analysis we do as a statistical office, we are happy to do so and support you also with knowledge about the data sets. And now when it comes to the condition account, also there, I think there will be more interest than the extended account in terms of policy uptake, but of course, it's not that it is new data. It is out there in Germany, has been out there, but there as well, I think we are the first one giving a broad overview over available data sets, which could be an advantage for more applied research. And of course, we have high hopes on the services accounts that we can there provide analysis that makes a difference. Yeah, when it comes to heat island effects or flood protection, where we don't have countrywide data available yet.
Okay, thanks. Kaia, your experience with your policy users.
Yeah, I was really thinking you mentioned the triple planetary crisis, so which combines the three areas like climate, pollution, and biodiversity. So, and this is quite common that we have the targets in, and there are even more targets what they actually follow. It's triple crisis, but there are more important targets to be we follow, you know, in economic and social spheres. I know, for this triple planetary crisis, I think currently there is a kind of a potential in this in ecosystem accounts, as if you think of biodiversity and restoration, and then if you think of climate and climate issues, then there are support grants for planting of a new forest. And but in another hand, there is a question: where do you plant this new forest, and for what purpose? For example, the kind of old semi-natural grassland is degraded to plant a new forest. So this would be a kind of a shame in that sense. So you lose in biodiversity sphere, but you gain in kind of climate sequestration, carbon dioxide sequestration area. So in that sense, as ecosystem accounts is a fully spatial accounts, I can imagine that there could be a good gain in that sense, and if it's also a part of official statistics. And it's also, in another hand, we know that it's why you know, ecosystem accounts is like accounts in a way we are linked to the other information in national accounts. We have the information on the subsidies, and we were talking about also on the subsidies today. So, going a bit further for the triple planetary crisis, I'm still thinking of our kind of this kind of innovative approach to produce the ecosystem extent accounts by land ownership. And where you have this, for example, in our case, with semi-natural grasslands, which should be restored and maintained. And you know who are the owners of this land, when you can design the measures, and you already have in statistics the information of the subsidies. But the information of the subsidies, where they go on a spatial scale, this link is still missing. But on the other hand, the subsidies and expenditure data are there already. And we already also see the CBD indicators set, but there are other, not only biodiversity and ecosystem-based indicators, but also indicators from different connected areas, which are part of other SEEA accounts, not ecosystem accounts, what we can connect, and also social and economic indicators. So in that sense, potential is there, but still kind of some of the aspects are missing, and some of the indicators for CBD also, but still in a process of development. As we heard yesterday, Anne Teller was telling us that also one focal point for the development of these indicators will be in Europe. So just first part, yes, of answer.
Yes. Thanks. And finally, Will, are there some examples that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I would first give a small sort of plug to a guidance document that UNEP created with the UN Statistical Division, which is called Policy Scenario Analysis using the SEEA EA. So that provides a whole context for how the SEEA EA accounts can be used in policy making and gives a number of different case study examples. But the one I would point to now is the instance from South Africa where pilot ecosystem accounts were developed for the eastern seaboard province of KwaZulu-Natal, and a policy application was done to the Tukela River Basin, which is a sort of heavily degraded river basin area where the water is coming from the upland areas supplying downstream cities, and analysis was done of the economic impact of different ecosystem restoration interventions. So measuring the cost-benefit analysis, the costs being the actual costs of intervention, for example, removal of invasive alien species or sustainable land management practices, and then the benefits were measured by valuation of ecosystem services, so the monetary value accounts. And that found some interesting findings that indeed the ecosystem restoration can have net economic benefits, and indeed, you know, there were benefits for South Africa in reaching their land degradation neutrality target under the UNCCD, but going further than that target for a full restoration scenario led to even more economic benefits. And I think there's an important point there to come back to economic benefits that links to what Paulo was discussing about, can we incentivize investment in some of these restoration activities? And to do that, we need to, you know, make an economic case, and accounts have a strong role to play there.
I've prepared one final question that we can do this, I think, before the lunch break. So maybe you can reflect on this in short. So the last question is, well, what would be your advice to countries that want to start implementing SEEA EA? So some general advice for countries who are just starting up this process. Let me start with Will this time. Yes.
Thanks, Sjoerd. A few quick points. I would say, I mean, first to prioritize which accounts. So don't try to do it all at once, to think through which accounts and which services you might like to prioritize, and that should be a function of discussions held with policymakers. So again, bringing together that data push and the policy pull. I think that doing account, depending on the size of the country, you know, doing accounts at a regional level, piloting accounts for particular states, provinces, or watersheds can be an extremely effective stepping stone to the development of national accounts. I think, as has been discussed quite a lot, there needs to be interdisciplinary teams of statisticians, GIS experts, ecologists, economists, hydrologists, etc. So bringing those people together. As the colleague from Mexico mentioned in the chat, I think engaging with the regional and local communities. So obviously here in this room, there's a fora for knowledge sharing, but there's other ones at the global level. There's some at regional level, like the African community of practice is very strong at the moment. And then finally holding kind of major events to bring all these people together. And I can't, you know, resist, seeing as Banumati is in the room, to mention the India's inaugural NCA forum, which was held a few years ago, that I was privileged to be able to support. And I think that was an amazing event to bring together high-level officials from the Indian government, key stakeholders, and set India on a strong path towards further advancement of the SEEA.
Simon.
Yeah, I think what is important, or what I could advise, or we could advise, is to really think in the long-term perspective, even though it might take a bit longer to produce results, but build the structure that once you get new data sets or new years, reporting years, you can include it relatively fast, and then have, yeah, also that you aim to produce long time series. And we did it in the way that we had like algorithms, Python-based scripts, which can be updated easily. And also like produce bottom-up accounts in the sense of like be geospatially explicit, like from the polygons and then aggregate it up for the extend account, but also for the condition. And then when the data allows also the services that they can be broken down to municipal level or whatever. Yeah. So.
Okay, thanks. And finally, Kaia.
Yeah, I think I also mentioned in my presentation that if you start with ecosystem extent account, there are two main options. Kind of there is a decision to make. You first, so this is something that probably those who start will need to be decide in the first order. So look at the international databases, look at what is available on international databases, which kinds of data, and what do you have locally. And then to talk to look at the task you have, so on which level you plan to provide the accounts and which accounts, and talk to your ministry stakeholders, and then also to your mapping agencies, or also to those active in a field, and then decide whether you will adjust the international data to your local needs, or you compile your own integrated ecosystem map. So this is kind of a decision point, and this is something what needs to be, I think, done in a first order, but this depends on a task you will handle. So is the precision, well, is it good enough what you get from, for example, for Korean, which is now 25 hectares, but it gets better in the future? Is that good enough of a task what you have? Like we heard yesterday, Anne Teller was talking us about the restoration, and those our, for example, these restored grassland, these are like could be half of hectares size. So you will lose them if you just use not enough detailed or precise data. So depending on the task you have, you will should decide how you compile the extent. This is our experience. And then, of course, identify those important condition and the service variables. And also for the condition, a lot of data are there. This is something that you do not produce in stats offices. These data are around and available in some in spatial scales, other not, but in different other institutions. But for services, you have to want to make the decisions again in which way you go. So start with, of course, with the physical data and the modeling, and then talk next. So look at the next steps. What would be next? What would be next data demand? So open dialogue with stakeholders and scientists, and some decisions to make. And go to consulting also to, like I told you, we learned a lot from Statistics Netherlands. We learned a lot also from Rocky Harris, for memorial to whom we did yesterday. So Rocky Harris was visiting also us in Estonia. So we had a joint event. So we had a kind of open discussions on the issues, on the for the whole process of compiling the sequence of ecosystem accounts. So try to find people who could provide you the answers, and then later on you can also be helpful to others. So it's not about kind of connecting to others who do the work. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think with that we come to the end of this session. Well, first of all, thanks to the panelists, to the presenters. I think it was an excellent session. We had a lot of good examples, national examples, local examples. Well, ecosystem accounting is a very rich area with a lot of different dimensions that we've been discussing today. So I think it was a very fruitful discussion. Also very good to see, well, that with implementing, there are many common challenges that we face with implementing on the national scale. I think it was good discussing this. So on the one hand, I think there's a lot of progress in countries, but of course there's a lot of to do, and also helping countries who are just starting up this process. And hopefully this session also contributed to that. And with that, I think we'll hand over back to you.
Thank you, Sjoerd, for this very, very interesting session. And I think now we're ready for lunch break with some organizational information from Michael first.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you. It was a very interesting session again. And we are running, yes, you know, we ran a little bit late. So my proposal is that we start with the poster session at 1:35. This gives us 50 minutes of lunch break. I think this should be feasible to get some lunch and some rest. But it would be good to be back at 1:35 in front of the room where we have the posters. And then I would invite the poster presenters maybe to take 10 minutes to explain the posters and then be available for questions and answers. And yeah, I think you can also grab your coffee and just bring your coffee for the poster session. I think this is a way to use the time most efficiently. Nevertheless, I have to ask again, please be in the room at 2:30 sharp so that we can really start on time. Having said this, thank you very much and bon appetit.